Good morning, Maddie. I know I just did one of these yesterday, didn't I? But as sometimes happens, I woke up at 1 in the morning to pee, and I'm still up. It's 4 now. So I've been up watching YouTube and drinking coffee and had my breakfast and took my meds. And when it gets light, if it's not raining, I'll take a bike ride. While there's a lull in the rain, I will read there's 5 stories left in Thai vignettes. Maybe we'll get through them today. I don't know if I'm in good voice or bad voice, but we're going to give it a shot. The first story we're reading today, children, Hop on Pop. I used to love to read to my kids. I read the first Harry Potter book, The Philosopher's Stone, to the kids before and after school program, did all the voices. And by then, the kids were so familiar with the movies that they wanted me to do all the voices the way they're done in the movies. And back then, I still had a facility for dialects, which I have since lost. But I did that. I went through, I read the whole novel, did all the voices as they were done, tried to be Maggie Smith, tried to be Robbie Coltrane, and you're a wizard, Harry. Oh, God, it sucks now. But anyway, yeah. I just blew out my Eustachian tube. What a drag it is getting old. Legal Eagles is the name of this story. What's this? Oh, yeah, all right. So there was a guy who was writing articles. His name was something Fox, F-O-X, something Fox. And he came to Phuket, I don't know, 91, 92. And he was retired young from some industry in the States. He was American, I remember that. And he was writing articles for the Phuket Gazette on investing, on the Thai stock market, I think. And he tried to open a business on Phuket. He was this very strident, cocksure, argumentative American guy. And I think he lasted about a year. Then he went home broke. I'm sure to this day he badmouths Thailand like it was Thailand's fault. But I just love that irony that the guy was writing articles as an expert on investment when he lost his shirt. He just came, did everything wrong, and lost his shirt. Legal Eagles. Kun Padet helped the Farang into a chair and asked his secretary to bring some tea. The Farang was already talking as Padet moved back around his desk. My name's Renard, he said. Oh, and I'm a member of the bar of the state of California. So Steve will just use his own accent. I lived in California until I was 10 years old. So this is probably a California by way of New York and Iowa accent. Kun Padet nodded sympathetically, as if this was the confession of some disease that the two men shared. But I live most of the year on Phuket, so I know my rights. I was assaulted last night in a bar on Patong Beach. There were witnesses who can identify the men who assaulted me, and I want them to pay damages. Kun Padet opened a fresh legal tablet and wrote the Farang's name on the top line of the first page. Why have you come to me, Mr. Renard? Renard. I was so clever as a young man. The guy's name was Fox. So Renard is the French word for fox. Steve's kind of phoning it in on the names, isn't he? Why have you come to me, Mr. Renard? People say you're the best lawyer on the island. I mean, why don't you go to the police? I went to the police last night, right after the assault. I got a copy of the police report right here, but they won't do anything. They told me to forget it, but I'm not going to forget it. I'm a lawyer, and I know my rights. Somebody's going to pay for this. The Farang lifted one leg of his trousers to show Kun Padet a bandage on his knee. He began to place pieces of paper on Kun Padet's desk. I got a report from the hospital detailing injuries and Polaroid photographs taken by the police last night. I've got the full names of 4 bar girls who witnessed the assault and the nicknames of the bartender and the doorman and the 2 motorcycle taxi drivers who assaulted me. Kun Padet gathered up the papers, scanned them, and placed them beside the legal tablet. What were you doing in that bar last night? What does that matter? It addresses the issue of character and credibility. But never mind. Why did these men attack you, Mr. Reynard? I said something they didn't like. Actually, I said something to this girl I was with, and she didn't like it. She told the bartender, he called his buddies, and they grabbed me and threw me out into the street. Right out on the pavement, I skinned my knee on the sidewalk. Ruined a very expensive pair of pants, too, and somebody's gonna pay for them. The Farang brought out a plastic bag and removed a pair of torn and dirty trousers, dropping them onto Kun Padet's desk. Kun Padet looked at the soiled pants on his desk, but did not reach out to pick them up. He pursed his lips and tapped them with the eraser on the end of his pencil. "What did you say?" he asked. "It doesn't matter. Look, I'm an American. You may not know it, but America and Thailand have a treaty which guarantees me all the same rights and privileges a Thai national enjoys. Thai law expressly grants everyone lawfully present in the country the right to air his views. And listen, there are more Thai expats in Los Angeles County than there are Americans in the whole Kingdom of Thailand. All of them can own a home, a car, 100% of a business, and they may express their opinions with fully the same liberty as any U.S. citizen. I wish sometimes that they could enjoy a generous dose of the larcenous niggling that I have to put up with here. But I guess that's just one of the many ways that America demonstrates its essential superiority." Kun Padet lowered his pencil and raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you said last night at the bar?" "No." "What did you say?" The Farang spoke a few words, and then there was silence in the office. The 2 men regarded each other for a moment, and then Kun Padet reached out to his intercom. "Miss Wasana," he said, "don't bother making tea." He slid the Farang's papers across the desk. He tore the top sheet off the legal pad, the one with the Farang's name written on top, and he used it to pick up the ruined trousers and hand them back to the Farang. Then he crumpled the sheet of yellow paper and dropped it into the waste paper basket. "I'm afraid I won't be able to help you," he said. "There will be no charge for this office visit. Thank you and good afternoon." The Farang sat forward in his chair and glared at Kun Padet. "Wait a minute. I'm handing you a sure win case here. I've been injured and somebody's going to pay for it. I know my rights. And I have the same rights as any Thai citizen." Kun Padet stood up and opened the door. "You missed the salient point, Mr. Reynard. Any Thai citizen who said what you said would have received far worse. They were gentle with you because you are a guest in this country, Mr. Reynard. You should remember that and act like a guest. Now, must I call my driver and have him throw you out, or will you be leaving?" The Farang rose stiffly to his feet and limped to the door. "You'll see," he said. "I'll get another lawyer, and I'll win damages like you've never heard of. Then I'm going to pack my bags, take all my money out of your crummy banks, and I'm going to leave this country forever. For the first time, Kun Padet smiled at the Farang. That would be most kind, he said. On behalf of everybody in Thailand, both Thai and Farang, let me say thank you. I have a feeling, if memory serves, I wrote this either as Mr. Fox was leaving or shortly after he left, but I think that on behalf of everybody in Thailand, Thai and Farang, let me say thank you for leaving. That was directed right at him. Did not like that guy. Did not like that guy. I also, I still feel that as we are guests in this country, and yes, there are pieces of paper in filing cabinets in Bangkok that say Americans have X rights or Y rights in this country, but everybody knows your rights at the moment that you are interacting with authority, a cop or a lawyer or a judge or a doctor, a senior doctor in the hospital. Your rights in that moment are what that Thai person thinks your rights are. And if you want to get done, you've gone to the transport office to get a registration for your motorcycle. You've gone to the land office to get a tabian bond so you can apply for a long-term visa. Whatever it is that you're doing when you're interacting with authority in this country, and the authority in this case being a collection of taxi drivers, bartenders, and bar girls, it is to your advantage, Maddie, to, let them set the rules and play by their rules in that moment, whatever the rules are. And certainly opening up your mouth and talking about shit, whether it is Article 212, 211, whether it's lèse-majesté stuff, or simply saying something like, I don't keep my money here because your banks suck, things like that. There's no profit in that freedom of speech. You gain nothing. It's not like, Thomas Paine handing out his pamphlets on revolution on the streets of Boston in 1776. No, you're just a guy trying to get through your day, and you don't want to piss anybody off because these people, you're a guest here, and these people can do shit to you, What I did for love. Oh, again, this is a transcription. I went home from the immigration office and typed this. I can remember that. I was here, I had a variety of visas back in the 80s and 90s. A tourist visa for a long time. I would go back and forth to Penang every 3 months and just get a new tourist visa. That they're clamping down on, or have clamped down on that. You can't really do anymore for any length of time. Then I got a work permit and got a business visa for a couple of years for my job, and then I got a marriage license, some kind of visa connected to being married to a Thai, and we would have to go every year. I think we did this for 3 years before we left. Go down to immigration and show them photographs of our life together. Photographs of us in the hospital at the births of our children, birthday parties, anniversary parties, Songkran, things like that. Show them that we were actually living together, and I had not married her for a green card. Yeah. So this is one of our immigration department visits. What I did for love. Graham stared at the tourist and wished that he too was wearing shorts, though he knew that coming into the immigration department with bare legs would doom his chances of renewing his yearly visa. That was certainly the case in the 80s and 90s. Now, I have been to Phuket immigration twice in the last 3 years. Now I go to Phang Nga. But I think Phuket immigration, those officers, they've seen everything. They've seen people come in dressed like pigs. And I suppose they've seen people come in like in tuxedos or something. When I was there, I saw an awful lot of Farang dressed inappropriately, and they still seem to be getting their paperwork through the pipeline. So I don't know. But yeah, back then you had to dress up, and you had to bring a gift. It was all right for a tourist to come beg a week's extension dressed like a bum, and for his girlfriend to dress that way too, since even if she came dressed in an evening gown and a sash that said Miss Thailand, the officers would still treat her like a bar girl. But for a man in Graham's position, nothing but long trousers and a freshly pressed button-down shirt would do. Starting to rain again. A quick aside, there's a movie called Muang Ra, maybe I've talked about this before. It's about Phang It's about the tin mining industry in the early 1900s, between about 1904 and 1910, I think. And it's set in this area, so I've watched it. And it's covers 4 years of a young man's life. But because the only thing most Thais know about Phang Nga is it's the rainiest province in Thailand, we get the most rain of any province in Thailand. And the Ranong, Phang Nga, Phuket coast. And because that's all Thais the general public know about Phang Nga, it is raining in every single scene in this movie. Ha! Even though it covers 4 years, and we assume some of these scenes would have taken place in the summer, in the dry months, no. They pander to what the audience is familiar with, and so it's just raining like hell in every single scene in this movie. And it's raining again now. I thought I caught a lull. Let's see if you can still hear me. Rain on a tin roof. So yeah, Graham is in the immigration. He's looking at a tourist who's dressed like a bum. Graham's hair was trim, and he'd shaved that morning, and his son, who was sleeping in his lap, had on a tiny little denim playsuit that had been purchased at the Talat Nat just for this occasion. They looked quite respectable, Graham was sure, as they sat in sweaty discomfort on a metal folding chair in the waiting area. He hoped that Sergeant Somchai would finish asking his wife the embarrassing questions pretty soon so that he and his son could rejoin them in the air-conditioned comfort of Somchai's office. This was the 3rd year that Sergeant Somchai had done the visa interviews, and Graham thought that by now the officer should know the answers to the embarrassing questions by heart. Number 1, Graham had met his wife when he had just started work as disc jockey on Phuket's English language radio station, and Anasura was sales manager for a department store. That's how I met my wife. She came to buy an advertising package on his radio show, and he asked her to dinner. That's how I met my wife. They were married a year later, and now they had one son. And she'd never been arrested, nor had Graham. Well, I had in the States, of course, but I'd never been arrested in Thailand. Still have not. God knows I've tried to get arrested. Graham hated the embarrassing questions, just as he hated the necessity of groveling in front of a petty bureaucrat. Lately, he was hating more and more things about life on Phuket. The way people drove on the roads, the way stray dogs roamed the beaches in packs, the way people looked at him and his wife when they went out together. He'd heard stories that made him dread the day a decade in the future when he would go out in public with his son and get those looks. Had a friend in Bangkok, David Pratt, a journalist, who had a 16-year-old Lukrung, half Thai, half Farang son. And as soon as his son became a teenager, every time they'd be out together on the street in Bangkok, people would shout, "Tot, tot, faggot, faggot," at him and his son, because they assumed that this was a Farang sex tourist and a money boy. And so I think David Pratt left Thailand, and I think that was one of the reasons he left. More and more often, Graham would become nostalgic for the strangest things, for snow and lamb chops and sportscasters on the TV with accents like his own. Often the yearning would become so poignant that he couldn't concentrate, and he would check his bank book and see again that he had more than enough money to take his little family home. He had work waiting for him in his brother's company, and there was plenty of room for them in his mother's house, but Anasura wouldn't have it. She was afraid to leave Thailand, afraid of snow, and afraid of strange foods like lamb chops, and afraid of people who didn't speak Thai. She'd made it clear that she wanted their son to be raised and educated in Thailand, and Graham knew there was no shaking her convictions. He sat in the stuffy waiting room, his shirt soaked with sweat under the limp weight of his sleeping son, and he watched the tourist try to explain to a very bored officer why he needed an extra week in Phuket. The tourist was buying the lease on a bar in Patong, and the deposit money had not yet arrived by wire from Europe. Graham wanted to get up and tell the guy that he should go back to Patong, pack his bags, and catch the next plane out. Graham wished that he and the tourist could trade places. Let the tourist sell radio advertising to support a wife and child in a country where he looked different from everybody else, smelled different from everybody else, ate different foods, worshiped a different God, observed different rules. Graham would go home to a place where he knew the law was on his side, where things you bought at the store and people you hired to do a job worked like they were supposed to. Graham looked at the tourist bar girl. She was leaning on the counter, her head on one hand, and she looked like she hadn't had much sleep the night before. Graham imagined her assuming the same posture with one elbow up on a bar. She obviously didn't give a damn whether her boyfriend stayed the extra week or not. In fact, she probably tried to convince him to go home and wire the money into her account. How was it, Graham thought, to be with a woman when you knew that in a week you could say goodbye and 24 hours later the bulk of an entire planet would be between you? The door to Sergeant Somchai's office opened, and Somchai stuck his head into the waiting room. He looked at Graham without a smile and said, "Sst." That was all the summons Graham got. He stood stiffly. Fox had stood stiffly in the story just before this one. I have echolalia. I repeat phrases. I'll get into it, repeat the same thing over and over sometimes. At any rate, currently I say at any rate, 50 times every day. At any rate, Somchai was already back behind his desk when Graham entered the office, so Graham clumsily closed the office door himself. He took the seat next to his wife, who did not look at him. Nobody spoke. Somchai shuffled some papers, chose some stamps from the cigar box at his elbow, and went thump, thump, thump. He put a bundle of documents into a basket and pushed an identical bundle into a drawer in a filing cabinet. Then, slowly, with the air of a man who won't be rushed, he took Graham's passport and selected a blank page. Casually, but in a room where the cool air was thick with tension, he added the stamp and signature, which meant that Graham's wife, Anusara, could stay for another year in Thailand. A lot of people don't get that story. A lot of people, a lot of these stories have a punchline. They've got like a O. Henry twist at the end. So the twist here is that Graham wants to go home. Graham's ready. He's done with the expat life. He wants to take his son home and raise his kid back in the States. But Anusara doesn't want to go. She wants to stay in Thailand. So in order for him to stay with her and their son in Thailand, they need this stamp. So they have gone to immigration to get a stamp in his passport so that she can stay in Thailand. Little kind of ironic twist at the end. It goes over a lot of people's heads when they read this book. One of the most common comments I've gotten in the reviews on Amazon is, and just speaking to people, is why? I don't understand the end of that. Why does she need a stamp in her passport? Why is it about this? So, you try things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Grand Hotel. Oh, I love this story. Hated my boss at the yacht club when I was teaching English at the Phuket Yacht Club. Hated this German guy, wanted him to leave. The general manager of the Koh Yai resort sat at his desk and stared at the air conditioner. He was squeezing a red rubber ball in his right fist as he sat, and the rhythmic flexing of the muscles in his forearm coincided with a steady drip of condensation from the bottom of the air conditioner. I hope you can hear me over the rain. I hope it's not too distracting. If it is, tell me. I'll just stop listening. I'll re-record this. He'd asked the engineers to fix the drip from the air conditioner 6 months ago on his first day in Thailand, and he'd mentioned it in the morning brief every couple of weeks since then, but with no results. These people. He transferred the red rubber ball to his left fist and picked up the receiver of his desk phone. He tucked the receiver between his shoulder and his ear, and he punched 3 numbers. Kunwasana, he said, hold all of my calls except from the home office. I'm expecting a very important call from the managing director. Thank you. He put the phone down and took the red rubber ball back into his right fist. He'd taken up the red rubber ball when he quit smoking a month after arriving in Thailand. He quit smoking in an effort to reintroduce a feeling of control back into his life. And instead, he found that he was more attached to the red rubber ball than he'd ever been to cigarettes. The phone rang and he almost jumped out of his chair. He put the red rubber ball down on his desk, took 3 long, slow breaths, and let the phone ring once more before answering. Yes, he said, GM speaking. His face immediately grew angry. Don't bother me with this now, he shouted into the phone and slammed the receiver down. He immediately picked it back up and punched 3 numbers. Kunwasana, he growled into the phone. I told you to hold my calls. I'm waiting for a call from the home office. I don't want to be bothered with selecting the fabric for the lobby chairs right now. He listened a moment and then spoke very slowly, as if to a child. I only want to talk to the managing director, nobody else. Do you understand? Good. He hung up and resumed abusing the red rubber ball. These people. It'd been different in the Bahamas. There, the people were corrupt. They were lazy. They would steal the shoes off a dead man's feet. But at least you knew where you stood with them. But these people. And in Belize, anybody with $10 in his pocket had to travel with an armed guard. But even in Belize, a man's handshake was as good as a contract signed by 10 lawyers. But these people. The phone rang again. And again, he laid down his red rubber ball, took his deep breaths, and waited for the second ring. Yes, GM speaking. Oh, hello, Madame Bosch. His eyes went to the air conditioner and focused on the drops as they formed under the cooling unit, ran to the left-hand corner, and dropped onto the potted palm that he'd placed under the air conditioner 6 months ago. Oui, madame, votre table sera prête ce soir à 20 hours. J'appuie seulement avec les vins de compliment votre dîner. Très contentement. Au revoir, madame. That's terrible French, but you and I don't care, right? Neither of us speaks French. We're going to let Steve get away with that reading. He put the phone down, then picked it up and punched 3 numbers. Kunwasana, please. I don't want any more calls from inside the hotel. Only a call from the home office. Do you understand? Yes, I know Mrs. Bosch is a regular guest, but please hold my calls. He replaced the phone and picked up his red rubber ball. These people. It hadn't been his fault. The trouble last night was entirely the fault of that stupid food and beverage manager. He'd inherited the man when he took over the hotel, and who ever heard of a Polish F&B manager anyway? When he came to inspect the beach 90 minutes before the guests were to be seated and saw that the tables were not even set, but that Polish clown was letting the staff leave the beach for their dinner break, he naturally told them that there would be no dinner until the party was prepared. After all, this wasn't Europe or the States, where the unions had made it impossible to run a five-star hotel with anything like five-star service. Labor is the cheapest commodity in Asia. And if somebody here doesn't want to put in the extra effort, they could just climb up on their water buffalo and go back to the rice paddies. The phone rang again. He sighed, said, "Damn you, Vasana." He picked up the receiver with the red rubber ball still in his hand. "Yes, what is it now?" Suddenly, he sat bolt upright and quickly transferred the phone to his left hand, then juggled until the phone was back in his right hand and the red rubber ball was on his desk. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good to hear from you, sir." "Well, it was quite ugly, sir. Yes, some guests were present. No, thank God, nobody hurt. Security got there very quickly, but some chinaware was broken. Yes, a few of the waiters are in jail now." He listened quietly for a few moments, then finally said, Yes, sir, I understand. Gabon, is it?" "Yes, I believe it's in Africa. May I ask, how many rooms in the property?" "I see. I believe the popular expression is boutique resort." "Yeah, of course. I'll pack this evening. Thank you, sir." He hung up the phone, then picked it back up and punched 3 numbers. "Wasana," he said, "have housekeeping bring about 10 cardboard boxes up to my rooms." "Yes, of course, empty boxes." "Tell them to meet me there in 10 minutes. Oh, and Wasana, have room service send up a pack of Marlboro Lights and a lighter. Thank you." He set the phone down and then threw his red rubber ball at the air conditioner as hard as he could. These people. I must have heard the guy say that at some point working for him. These people. Some people, can adapt to life in Thailand, to working in Thailand with Thai people in a Thai organization, and some people cannot. In this case, it's an international hotel chain. He wasn't working for a Thai organization, but there was probably 5 or 6 Farang working for the hotel and 150 Thai people. So it was a Thai organization. You play by house rules wherever you go. Go to America. I'm thinking of, if I can afford it, get a ticket, go visit my mom in Iowa for a couple weeks this fall. Fall's the best time to visit Iowa. It's the only time the weather's decent. Yeah, I'll go back, and there's different rules in Iowa. There's different rules sitting at my mother's dinner table than there are sitting here in my own home in Thailand. And that's just natural. Different rules, man. And if you're going to transplant yourself and try to make a life somewhere else, man, you learn the rules. Don't expect them to learn your rules. What is this? I don't remember. Okay. Oh, all right. I remember this. Yeah, there was a very scary, I think Danish or Swedish guy, Norwegian, on Phuket back in the day. He, all kinds of rumors about the guy. There were a lot of people in the bars tell you they were ex-CIA, 34 minutes. A lot of people tell you they were ex-Special Forces, ex-CIA, SAS, whatever. Or arc welders, underwater arc welders, whatever. Every guy you met in a bar had some dangerous, exciting backstory. And there was Steve, My degree's in theater. But anyway, there was this guy. He was really scary. And he was living with an American artist, a woman trained in Japan in printmaking, a very ancient form of printmaking. Wonderful woman, wonderful artist. And she used to show up around town with a black eye or a split lip every now and then. Everybody knew he beat her up, but everybody was afraid of the guy. And one day he hung her from the beams in their garage by her wrists. He tied her wrists together and hung her up. And he went behind her, he hung her up naked, and he went behind her and reached around her, and with his thumbs, one by one, very deliberately, he popped her floating ribs off the sternum. Just went down her body. I think there's 4 floating ribs, and he dislocated or broke 8 ribs, and with his thumbs, very deliberately, very slowly, and left the island. And she left the island immediately afterwards, and I don't know who found her hanging from the beams, naked with broken ribs, but boy, that must have been painful. Can you imagine the weight of your body hanging, and half the body weight is hanging off the rib cage and the lower spine, and he's just disconnected all the connections, so it's hanging by tendons and muscle alone, and it's, the pain must have been just excruciating. And he disappeared. He was on the island for a while, and then this little drama took place and he disappeared. But that has nothing to do with this story. I just used him as a character in this story. The mission. Missionary Mike invited the big American to join their table because he looked lost. Dario and Anders hated it when Mike latched on to tourists. So they shook hands with the big American, but without getting up from their chairs. His name was Ned. He was working on oil derricks in Indonesia. He'd only been on Phuket since noon. But he'd been drinking beer that whole time, charging himself up for the night ahead. And before the waitress brought him a fresh bottle, he'd announced that he had come with $2,000 in cash, and he planned to spend it all in 2 days. Missionary Mike began to show a real interest in Ned. Yeah, $2,000, that was a lot of money in 1988. I wouldn't mind living here, Ned said, and I'm always looking at emerging markets. I hear you can buy a bar here for just $5,000. Hell, that's nothing to me. While Missionary Mike hung on his every word, Dario watched the traffic. Dario owned a company that made and sold bathroom fixtures. He had a plant in Malaysia that employed 500 people, and 3 years ago his engineers told him that the plant's equipment was outdated and the whole place needed a refitting. But his accountants argued that it'd be wiser to relocate, build a new plant someplace where labor was cheaper. So Dario had scouted locations in Thailand, China, Laos, and Cambodia. He settled on 50 rai of land in Phuket. The plot was covered in tin mining slag and worthless for agriculture, miles from the beach and worthless for tourism, and thus a bargain at $10 million. Dario bought a 6-month option on the land and had his lawyers begin work on the paper. But then he read that the baht would be devalued, so of course he waited. That was 3 years ago. And every 6 months, Dario bought another option and watched the newspapers. 2 hours before Ned sat down opposite him, Dario had decided to forget Thailand and buy a defunct boiler plant north of Beijing. His decision involved many millions of dollars and would directly impact on the lives of 500 Malaysians who currently worked for him, 500 Thais who might have worked for him, and 500 Chinese who would work for him starting next year. As Ned shared his financial knowledge, Dario thought about what he would be having for dinner later. Now, Ned was teasing the waitress. Although Jugs was a go-go bar, the waitresses were just waitresses, and they did not appreciate being groped when they brought a tray of drinks to the table. Anders warned Ned to be polite if he expected decent service, and Ned snapped, "I know how to handle myself in a joint like this. Don't worry about me." Anders attempted a joke with, "Okay, who do you want us to notify when you end up in the morgue?" But the big American got aggressive and said, "Hey, buddy, I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years. I know 108 ways to kill a man." Anders had been a paratrooper in the Finnish army before he was recruited by the American CIA. His grandmother was Russian and Anders was fluent. He was dropped into Novosibirsk for a few years of deep cover. He performed quiet assassinations in 78, 80, and 83, but then his name appeared in a telex intercepted by the listening post on the roof of the American embassy in Moscow. He was pulled out and placed on ice in Padua in 87, where he did small favors for the Drug Enforcement Agency. When the Cold War ended, people like Anders were suddenly redundant and potentially embarrassing. So he decided to go into deep cover again. He moved to Phuket and he bought a small bar, and he was happy enough until 2 years ago. That was when he was standing at this bar watching the World Cup football finals, and a girl from Khon Kaen named Gop hit him behind the knees with a tool normally used to prune fruit trees. Anders knew the 108 ways to kill a man, and even without the use of his legs, he still could have used 50 of them to kill Ned from across the table. But he also knew that there are a million ways to die. Nobody's immune to any of them. Instead of answering the big American, he pulled his aluminum crutches out from under the table and excused himself to go to the men's room. Ned went on and on about himself and had 3 more beers, which missionary Mike paid for. Finally he asked, "So how long have you been here?" Mike admitted that he'd lived on Phuket for 8 years, and Ned began to ask the questions that Mike knew he would. This was where Mike went to work in earnest, so Dario left to meet friends for dinner. The 2 Americans huddled over the table as missionary Mike outlined the delights that could be had on Patong Beach by a man who had a little inside knowledge. Eventually, as Mike knew he would, Ned asked if Mike would guide him around that evening. Mike demurred, pleading that he really should get home to his wife, but Ned persisted, and finally Mike said, "Okay, but first he'd have to call the old lady and tell her he'd be late." Missionary Mike had no particularly colorful history before his appearance on Phuket. In fact, all you could really say about him was that he was a good listener. In 8 years, he never held a real job, but he owned his own house and his own car. His wife had a maid, and his kids went to private school. He made 3 phone calls from behind the bar, laying the groundwork for his night's work, and then he left to collect his new friend. Revenge. So I got revenge on the Finnish spook by having him crippled by a bar girl in this story. And I got revenge on all of the Falang. I don't know how it is now. I haven't been in a bar in a coon's age. But the bars used to be full of these guys that would tell you, all these stories about how wealthy they were. And I guess now it's Bitcoin, I suppose. They would give you, tell you what you should be doing with your money. And then, like Reynard, like Fox, they would get ripped off because they were dumb. Now, I think I'll do this the last one. How many more stories are there? There are, all right. So I'm going to do this last one. Then there are 3 more in the book, and then we'll go on to a different book. Paris Calling. Contrary to popular opinion, there are poor people in Singapore. And Chin was born one of the poorest. He had no idea who his parents were, but by the age of 6, he was living out of the trash dumpster outside the kitchen door of a 5-star hotel. The security guards took pity on him and allowed him to sleep in the car park, and eventually the kitchen staff started giving him scraps to keep him out of the garbage. When he was 15, they invited him inside the kitchen for the first time and put him to work washing dishes. He did that for 2 years, taking his salary in food and lodging in staff quarters. As soon as he reached the legal age to work, he graduated to busboy and then quickly to waiter. The first day they allowed him into the dining room was a red-letter day in Chin's life, and it changed him forever. The plush velvet upholstery, the fake medieval tapestries, even the plastic grapes hung from bunches from the air conditioning vents, seemed to him opulent beyond his wildest dreams. He thought the dining room of that French restaurant was an authentic recreation of heaven, and he became that most unstoppable force in the universe, a young man with a plan. For the next 13 years, Chin worked day and night, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. When he wasn't pulling double shifts waiting tables, he was going to night school to learn French. By his 30th birthday, Chin spoke the patois of 5 different wine-growing regions. He could cook a souffle in a wok, and he knew the French history right down to Louis XIV's shoe size. He also had a tidy sum in the bank, having spent not one Singapore dollar on anything but his clothes and his education for his entire working life. He got a passport, he got a backpack, and he got a beret. He gave notice to the food and beverage manager of the only home he'd ever known, and he was ready to go to France. Of course, one of the many things that Chin knew about the French was that they like cultured folk. You know, this, Maddie, again, a lot of exposition. I had to rely on exposition, just flat out, just declarative sentences. Here's backstory, boom. Here's the O. Henry twist, boom. There's your 1,000 words, send me a check. So there's a lot of talk, a lot of exposition. On the other hand, I'm reading a book right now by David Young, Skinworn, which I really do enjoy. David relies on dialogue. He's got a lot of talk. It's not the omniscient observer narrator explaining all the things the reader has to know in order to enjoy the story. He uses a device which is called the "as you know, Bob." 2 characters talking, "As you know, Bob, it was October when we found the body under the bridge." "Yes, I remember it was October and it was snowing, wasn't it?" "Yes, it was an early snow that year." Both these guys know all these things. Why are they telling each other things they already know? Because the reader has to know that. So there's a couple different ways to do that, a few different tricks. In Dan Brown's case, in things like the Da Vinci Code, he just makes his protagonist a college lecturer. And when he needs to deliver exposition about, medieval art or the Levant at the time of Christ, he just does a flashback to the lectern in the lecture hall, and the professor is pontificating to his class. And you just do an exposition dump. Boom! This is all the shit you need to know, dear reader. So, different ways to do it, different strokes for different folks. In 1,000 words, basically, you just have to just rely on exposition and run with it. Yeah. So, of course, one of the many things that Chin knew about the French was that they liked cultured folk, and part of being cultured was to be well-traveled. So instead of booking a direct flight, he decided to go overland, first up through Malaysia and Thailand, thence by boat to Madras, overland again across India and Pakistan to Karachi, by boat again through the Suez to Athens, and by train across Greece, the Slav republics, Hungary, and Germany, finally arriving in Paris with more stamps in his passport than a CNN correspondent. That was the plan. In reality, he made it as far as Phuket. On that night, Chin fell in love on an island where the only thing French are the fries. Her name was Pet. Pet means diamond, very common name for girls. Though you do meet men named Pet, nicknamed Pet, because their name is Som Pet or Chalum Pet or something like that, and then the family has shortened that to simply Pet. When you meet a woman named Pet, almost always, it's Diamond. She was named Diamond by her mother. Her name was Pet, and she was a dancer in a go-go bar on Patong Beach, which he only entered because of its name, The Follies. 2 years his senior and a battle-scarred veteran of 100 kinds of l'amour, Pet swept the stunned young tourist off to a little bungalow on the backside of Makam Bay, where he was less likely to notice that there were younger, prettier women in the world. A week later, he was married, and he'd invested his life savings in 16 rai of land, an ugly concrete bunker at Phuket Country Home, a 10-year lease on a beer bar on Kata Beach, and a handful of titles and deeds which said in Thai that all of the above belonged to his new bride. After he wised up to what had happened, which didn't take long at all, the desperation of finding that he'd traded Provence for Phuket almost drove him into the bay with a rock tied around his neck. What saved his sanity was a young girl that he met in the market in Phuket town. She was poor, a vendor of snails and mollusks, but young and sweet and beautiful. And Chin fell in love for the second time in his life. Since she was a good girl, and since he was already married, they couldn't consummate their love. But Chin was able to console himself by spending a few hours with her every week when he shopped for limes and oranges for the bar. The two of them had discussed running off together to marry and start a new life somewhere else, since Chin wasn't sure that his marriage to Pet was really valid anywhere outside of Phuket. Those papers were all in Thai as well, but Chin couldn't tear himself away from the bar, the house, and the land, representing as they did his life's work. So things went on like that in a weird and pathetic stasis until the night of Chin's 35th birthday. That night, Pet threw the annual party she gave to celebrate her husband's nativity and to show off her wealth. Normally, Pet invited a few friends and a lot of the girls she hated, since it's always more fun to enjoy an enemy's envy than a friend's congratulations. But this year, she had an unexpected guest show up, Chin's girlfriend from the market. The girl had come to have things out with Pet once and for all, and in the spirit of universal sisterhood, the two women went peacefully together into the kitchen to discuss the matter. Chin sat on the porch, chewed his nails, and dreamed of France. After an hour, the two women emerged to announce their decision. They would leave it up to Chin. Up to you. Which never really means that, does it? He could keep Pet and the bar, the house, and the land, but from now on, Pet would do the shopping herself. Or he could go with the market girl and the clothes on his back. That was 1 year ago. In one of the hotel trade papers last week, there was a piece in the society pages about a French tourist, a Mademoiselle Dulac, aged 58 years, who had met and married a Singaporean national named Mr. Chin Ha Fung, aged 36, who was a sommelier at a big hotel in Bangkok. They would be honeymooning in Nice, the paper said. So he eventually found his way to Paris. That comes from a conversation. I took, they used to advertise up in Chiang Mai, 54 minutes. I'll just tell you this little anecdote and then we're done for today. It has stopped raining. The sun will come up at 6. The sun will come up here in a few minutes and I'll see if I can get on the bike and ride. So I went up north. I went to Chiang Mai and I took one of these tours they used to advertise, Smoke Opium with the Hill Tribes. You ride an elephant up into the mountains and visit a hill tribe village and there's supposed to be opium. And all of that is chronicled in a book we will read, so I won't share that with you. But the night before we left, we were in a place called Phang, F-A-N-G, which is kind of on the, I guess, Thai-Lao border up there in the Golden Triangle. Dumpy little place, really terrible place. And there was a little time between dinner and going to bed, and I found kind of a restaurant bar on the waterfront. There's a river there that forms the border. Mekong, maybe, I don't know. And there was this guy, this Chinese guy in there alone. And I sat down, and a lot of people up there are Chinese by, you know, their grandparents or whatever. They're half Chinese, half Thai, three-quarter Chinese, whatever. And the whole Kuomintang army, you know, ran south. Like the ones who couldn't get to Taiwan in 36, whenever the revolution was. Yeah, they went south into Thailand and started dealing drugs. And so there's a lot of Chinese up there. And this guy was sitting in there, and he got me soda, and we sat and smoked cigarettes together, little Chinese guy. And he told me this story about how he'd met this woman. He'd come from Singapore, he was on his way to France, and he met this woman in a bar and fell in love. And he'd never had a woman before. He was a virgin. He was in his 30s, and he was a virgin. And he had married her and sunk all his money into this bar and a house and some, I don't know, rice paddies or rambutan trees or something. Anyway, he'd put his whole wad in there. And he had met this, he and his wife were on the outs. They weren't speaking. He really hated her and he wanted to leave. And he had this girlfriend from the market that he'd met, and he wanted to run away with her, but he had no money and he didn't know what he was going to do. And he still wanted to get to France. And he said they'd given him a choice. The two women had put their heads together and given him a choice and pick one or the other of us. And he said, you know, I think I just may get on the bus and get the hell out of town and try to get to France somehow. I can't pick one or the other. I'm tired of them both, and I'm angry at them both. And he said, I'm going to decide tonight, and in the morning I'll do whatever I decide. So I said, okay, and I paid for my Coke, and I went to bed, and the next morning we got on our elephants, and we went up into the jungles and smoked fake opium. I think it was caramel sauce. I think it was dessert topping. It wasn't opium, what we smoked. But it was fun to ride an elephant, I guess. For about 5 minutes, fucking things go like this. It's like 8 feet in the swing of their hips back and forth. And man, it's like being on a boat in rough water. It makes you sick. Anyway, yes, I never found out what happened to the guy. And so I wrote this story to try to give him a happy ending. All right, dude. I'm going to go start my day. You go start yours or do whatever you're going to do. And I will, we got 3 more stories to go and then a new book. Thanks for listening, dude. I really appreciate your attention. This is fun. Thanks.